I think it's really important for an organization such as TranCelerate to be at partnerships in clinical trials. My name is Dalvir Gill. I'm the CEO of TranCelerate BioPharma Inc. And TranCelerate is a not-for-profit organization that was created approximately a year and a half ago. And it is an organization of a number of biopharmaceutical companies, 19 to be precise, that have formed a consortium to look to simplify the research and development process, to accelerate it, to simplify it, primarily in the area of the pre-competitive area, areas where we have very similar processes across many companies, but we do them very differently. The idea of TranCelerate to see if we find some efficiencies in doing things in a collaborative manner across multiple companies. There were 5 initiatives ongoing when the company was initially created, and those are progressing along extremely well. Since my discussion here at Partnerships last year, those projects have progressed significantly. We've gone on a risk-based monitoring paper from a promise to publish a position paper to actually publishing it. We've now launched multiple pilots across multiple therapeutic areas in the member companies to learn from that position paper and the methodologies that we are implementing across many companies. We're working closely with the regulators, EMA, PMDA, and of course the FDA, to improve on the methodology. So real progress being made, and in the coming days, a new iteration of the paper will be released as learnings as we move forward, and we expect that process to continue. Our investigator portal, or shared collaboration platform as we call it now, is at this moment being constructed. It took a little longer than we had expected, but it's a complex IT implementation across multiple companies, involving sites, involving member companies, various IT systems that need to fit into it. So it took a little longer, but now it's an active, funded project. And hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to give an update in terms of progress there. And it'll be released in stages because it's a pretty complex IT implementation. So that's going well. Our project where we work closely with CDISC and FDA and Critical Path Institute under the CFAS collaboration for clinical data standards has made enormous progress since we last spoke. We've actually released standards in record time. And our aim there is to do 55 standards, therapeutic area standards, in 5 years in collaboration with our colleagues at CDISC, Critical Path, and of course the FDA. And that project, essentially what TranCelerate does there is provide manpower, expertise, funding for technology, etc., and provide some of the subject matter experts to move that process along faster. But it's primarily in the hands of CDISC in terms of the machinations of the standards itself. The other project that's worthy of discussion is a site qualification training program, project I should say. We have now released multiple iterations of that information. We've put it in the public domain. So now, for example, GCP training across sites is no longer repeated by member companies at TranCelerate. The attestation of one company that a site is adequately GCP trained now, after multiple discussions. By the way, this wasn't easy to get 19 companies to agree on another company's attestation of a site's qualification, but we've got there. And so now we don't repeat that process. And that project is moving on to multiple other things, including common forms, CV templates, and eventually a clinical trial agreement, which is going to be on the critical path if we don't deal with that. So that project is also going extremely well. And then the comparators project. This is probably our most, it was probably the one project that most assume would never happen because it goes to the core of how companies typically look at areas that are non-competitive in a competitive manner. So I can tell you today that multiple member companies have signed on a master service agreement. A significant number of transactions of comparator drug from member company to member company have already occurred with enormous reductions in terms of time, in terms of acquisition of the drug, a much better understanding of the stability of that particular drug in terms of temperature excursion, so you avoid a cost implication there by not having drugs that may be sitting somewhere that we're not sure whether they're in or out of range in terms of temperature excursion. With much more robust stability data, we're actually avoiding a significant number of temperature excursions. And last but not least, we avoid the possibility of counterfeit drugs in the supply chain, because that is, a problem certainly in some regions of the world. In this case, the drug goes directly from one member company to another There's no room for it to go into a third party and anything to happen to the drug from a counterfeit perspective. So these are the original projects, and they're going really well, and they have natural next steps that we've already implemented. So none of these projects have been shut down. They all have next steps that we're continuing to enhance the value of those on. I think the next steps are reasonably obvious. For example, I mentioned the risk-based monitoring paper. It needs to continue to improve the methodologies, work closely with the sites that are now implementing the risk-based monitoring methodology, along with the member companies, along with our CRO partners who work with those member companies. So those learnings come back to the project team, and they improve upon the methodology. And it's not just a white paper, it is an actual methodology that people can use and implement. And I should say that we've put that onto our website so that it's available to anybody, not just member companies. And I can tell you almost 2,000 unique downloads have occurred of that paper and its methodology outside of the member companies. So we know this interest, and we will continue to provide that to everybody who wants to benefit from that methodology. So I think one of the most encouraging things for us is that beyond the first 5 initiatives, and they were, we talked about low-hanging fruit. These were obvious projects. They made sense. People could intuitively understand what we were trying to do. I think we've evolved from there. We've taken a more strategic approach and determine within the TranCelerate configuration with the member companies' involvement, what the current state of clinical trials looks like and what we want it to look like in 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then what do we need to do to get from the current state to the future state, and build a strategic roadmap. And so we now have a pretty strategic roadmap that takes us to that place. And you'll find that the projects we are now launching fit on that roadmap. They either enhance something we've already invested time and money and effort in, or they are really foundational to that roadmap. And the site collaboration platform I talked about earlier is foundational to that particular collaboration and the future state of clinical trials. But a collaborative platform, a site portal, shall we say, without an investigator registry is not as valuable. So one of the new projects we've launched is an investigator registry that the member companies are looking at, and it will feed into the collaborative platform. So the reason I'm tying these things for you is so that the audience understands that new projects being launched aren't just projects we pick that make sense. They make sense on a roadmap to try to get us to a future state of clinical trials that's more efficient. Data flows end to end. They are seamless. We don't repeat work. They're patient-centric. We have colossal data analytics and all the things we want that we have to find a way to get there. But TranCelerate can help certainly move that landscape in that direction. Another project is the Common Protocol Template. We've just launched that, and as you can tell, as I mentioned earlier, our project on clinical data standards is looking at therapeutic areas. Now, if that's something we're putting out, say, for asthma and then for diabetes, for example, it makes sense to look at the protocol template in a particular therapeutic area. Now, the FDA, for example, is extremely excited, working closely with us, approached us almost immediately, and we're working closely with the Janet Woodcock's team to see how we can work together with the regulators to come up with a common protocol template at a therapeutic level. And that project is actually coming along really fast. And so, again, what I'm outlining to here is the Common Protocol Template project fits with the Clinical Data Standards project, and again, it moves the landscape forward. Last but not least are 2 projects that really are in the same vein in terms of clinical trial networks and patient populations. Pediatric clinical trials are a challenging area of research for biopharmaceutical companies, academic institutions, cooperative groups, etc. And one of the challenges is that any one given company doesn't have enough clinical trials that are needed for pediatric research to be able to build a pediatric clinical trials network and a research network that is sustainable. Now, if you think about that across 19 companies, they have a lot more research going on. So what we're looking to do is try to work with multiple partners, by the way. We're partnering with pharma, we're partnering with bio, we're partnering with a number of other organizations interested in the whole pediatric space, to see if we can find a way to create pediatric clinical trials networks that we stand them up, We provide a lot of support to get them ready, to get the sites and the methodologies and processes all worked out. And then for that network to stay fed with new studies from multiple companies rather than that one company. The current circumstances is a company will invest a fair amount of effort in building up a network for a particular purpose, and when that purpose is over, and if there's nothing else to go, the network is brought down and we repeat the process. Pretty inefficient, and we have lots of drugs that we need to put into the pediatric space in the future. So the attempt here is to try to find something sustainable in the pediatric space. Similarly, a sister project is in minority patients. I think that's an area we just have to do better in. Not enough minority patients participate in clinical trials, and we are, again, partnering with various bodies to see, including, by the way, pharma, to see what it is we can do from a 19-company perspective. 19 companies that do a very large number of clinical trials. From their perspective, what can we do to better encourage participation of minority patients into clinical trials? Is it through better engagement with minority investigators? Is it better outreach in catchment areas with large minority population? What's the best way to do it? We don't have a simple answer, but we are launching really that particular project to tackle that. And then we have 3 other projects that really are exploratory, and we're not putting them out in the public domain. These are projects we've said they make sense, but we're not sure how we should tackle it. Who should we partner with? Are we just going to add noise to it, or should we just wait? Is it ready for us? But we know these are areas that are ripe for potential implementation, or improvement in efficiency, and those will read out in sort of the end of the second quarter, end of the third quarter time frame. And if they make sense, we will launch them. They're already funded. Launch them with the funding that's already available. Or if they don't make sense, or the timing isn't right, just basically say we'll come back to this at a later point. I would say one of the most encouraging things that I see is the level of engagement and enthusiasm of the people from the member companies. We're not funded with cash in a significant way. Our primary funding is the right people with the right expertise, some of the best minds in these member companies being allocated to the projects we're doing, not only to the allocation of the project to implement, but to decide what we should do, to this roadmap that we created. These wasn't created by folks at TranCelerate. This was created by the member company staff, figuring out and crowdsourcing their own companies to figure out where are the pain points and what should we tackle and what should the future state look like. And from that, you're finding a level of collaboration that probably is unprecedented in our industry. And for me to see that in action every day is really, really encouraging. I think it's really important for an organization such as TranCelerate to be at partnerships in clinical trials. This is a conference at which many of our external stakeholders are present, our CRO partners, other biopharmaceutical companies, our member companies, regulators, and so on. And at this conference, there's also the opportunity to look at new methodologies, new technologies, new ideas that come up from the various people who attend this particular conference. And we at TranCelerate benefit from those ideas, and in return share how we're making progress with the folks attending this conference in the different presentations and panels that we do. So it's a symbiotic relationship from the TranCelerate side, in that we can garner enormous information and new methodologies, ideas, and thinkings around the R&D and clinical trials area, and in return we can update that same audience with the progress we're making. So I think it's really important that we are here and we continue to be here.